typically sponsor 4 events a year, if not more. Our keynote event is this year going to be August 1st. And it is called the Pocumtuck Homelands Festival. We're in our 7th year of, it's a Native American music festival with a number of exceptional artisans and a lot of different information about the different tribes in our area. We partner with the Nipmuc tribe there are actually two tribes in Massachusetts, also the Abenaki from the south of Vermont, the Narragansett tribe from Rhode Island, and the Aquinnah Wampanoag from Martha's Vineyard. Those are our principal partners. So we typically, as I said, sponsor 4 events. This year is an exception. As you all know, down on the coast, around Plymouth, they are celebrating the arrival of the Pilgrims at Plymouth in 1620. And what we basically determined to do based on our mission statement is to provide an Indigenous counterbalance to all of the hoopla that's going on down around the coast, celebrating the arrival of the Pilgrims. For us and many of the Indigenous peoples, that is 1620 was a benchmark that really signaled the beginning of 400 years of oppression, of a genocidal eviction from lands. In fact, we always choose to mention the fact that we are occupying Indigenous lands. We are benefiting from lands that were taken from the Indigenous people. It is still going on. We need to honor the fact that this is Indian land that was taken oftentimes by violent means. So we have begun our year-long series of events. We started in March with an event in the vicinity of Dartmouth College, and we move on down the Connecticut River watershed. Our final event will be in October at the Connecticut River Museum at the mouth of the river. Otherwise, in the month of July, we'll have an event on July 11th, a paddle on the river to celebrate the Indigenous presence on the Connecticut River. And on July 26th, we will have a number of speakers from Liz Coldwind from the Nipmuc Nation and Chief Roger Longtoe and Rich Holshoe from the Abenaki on the July 26th. And then August 1st will be our Pocumtuck Homelands Festival. So we need to thank the Babson 2020 Foundation, of the Peace Development Foundation, who contributed quite a bit to help us put all of these events on. We certainly want to thank Jupong Lin for her tech support. I believe that's all I need to tell you about the Nolambika project. We have a website containing all of the different information that I've just mentioned in a lot more detail. So I will be thrilled to turn it over to Tall Paul, coming to us from Minneapolis. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Hello, before you start, Paul, I'm sorry, there's a couple of other things that I forgot to mention. Again, for folks who are not familiar with Zoom, in the upper right-hand corner, you should see either an icon with the 3 little, like a tic-tac-toe symbol, or something that says speaker view. So you can choose either to view everyone on the screen in little frames, or if you choose speaker view, then when Paul begins to present, he'll be the main, image that you see. The other thing I wanted to mention was that we are recording this presentation. So if anyone does not want to have their image on the recording, you should keep your video muted or stopped. Other than that, I think we're ready to go, Paul.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Paul. Buju Ginawa, Paul Indigenous Kaz, Gakabi Kong and Dunjaba, Minawa, Gazaga Squadron, Maycog, Nambinda Gabi, Gaz, Adash, Gazaga Squadron, Adash, Wasazi, and Dudane. My name is Paul. I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, enrolled in the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe tribe, and I am of the Bowhead clan. And I apologize. I'm using my girlfriend's workstation. It's kind of fancy. It's like I'm used to one computer screen, but I'm like having to operate with 3 different screens here. So that's why it might look like I'm looking away from the camera sometimes. But I'm glad to be here. Back when Diane reached out to me about coming to the festival this August, I was a little reluctant because she described it to me and it didn't seem like there had been a lot of hip hop there before, and I'm a hip hop artist. So I wasn't sure. I was like, well, you know, not that I was against the idea. I just was not sure if I would be received right because I am a hip hop artist, and you know, it didn't seem like that kind of festival. But she opened my mind to do it and explained that people need to see that Native Americans are still alive today and that we are represented in many different ways across different platforms. And so I'm here to share my perspective, my unique perspective as a human being who happens to be Native American, you know. For myself, I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm just gonna kind of tell my life story in a nutshell, you know, to give you that uniqueness of my life, you know, that there is no pan-Indian nation, that we don't all speak the same language or look the same. There are Black natives, there are white natives, or you could say light-skinned natives, dark-skinned natives, you know. There are natives that look many different ways across so many different tribes, and not all tribes are recognized, and we are so unique and different from one another. And I'm just here to share my story as one unique example. So I'm a hip hop artist, and I was born and raised in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to a young Native couple. My dad was not, he didn't have, neither my mom or my dad had the greatest examples growing up. But I didn't really know my dad. I didn't get to know him at all, really, until I met him for the first time when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And my earliest childhood memories, though, were of, I remember seeing my older brothers walk out the door for school one day. And for some reason, I can still see that image as clear as day in my mind. I think there was a tie to education there. Like I knew I was going to grow up and get educated. But another memory that I really remember from my early childhood was being in the kitchen, and my mom was married, and he was a very abusive man, and he would beat her and he would beat my brothers. He never really beat me except for this one time. And I remember being like 6 years old, sitting at the breakfast table eating my cereal, and there's a fly that landed in my bowl, and he said, you better eat it, like eat the cereal even though the fly's in there. I said, there's a fly in it though, I don't want to eat this. He said, you better eat it, boy, and I didn't. So he took my head and slammed it against the table, cut my cheek open, and I was just like a little kid, you know, 6 years old. That was one of my earliest memories, and that really prefaced a lot of the trends within my life growing up in the households I was raised in. There's a lot of negativity, not a lot of healthiness, you know. So I grew up having to learn from the mistakes of others, and I really have that to be thankful for. You know, I was fortunate to have so many bad examples. I guess it's kind of strange to say that, but there were so many bad examples that I was able to learn from them. I remember being in my grandma's household. My mom left that guy, and fast forward some years, I remember being at my grandma's, and you know, it was also not a great environment. At any given time, there might have been 3 or 4 different generations in the household at a single time. And my grandma, she was kind of like the chief of the tribe, you know. She didn't play no games. And I say that very seriously, but also lightheartedly, because now looking, you know, she's a sweet old lady now. She's sweet, and she calls me Polly and everything. Even though I'm a grown man, she still calls me Polly, and tells me she's proud of me and everything I'm doing. But back then, she was just a drill sergeant, and she had to be, and I didn't understand it at the time, you know. But the environment was like ashtrays, beer cans, my cousins dating gangbangers, and them showing me their guns and things like that. Seeing my uncle and my aunts intoxicated, acting foolish, and I had all these examples around me. And I remember sometimes when my grandma would sit me on the couch and make me watch like the Brady Bunch, you know, the Brady Bunch, due to the, all that is just like, there was this image on this screen that depicted this idea of a functioning family to me, is what I seen. I was like, okay, this house and the white picket fence and everything's all good. And I remember being about 8, 9 years old and telling myself that's what I want. Like, I don't want none of this around me. Like, I love my family, but I don't want to be like how they are, you know. And they were capable of more than that, and a lot of them are today. But I remember really specifically sitting on the couch one day and telling myself, you know, I'm not gonna be like this. You know, I'm not gonna be like my dad and not be in my kid's life. I'm not gonna be like my dad or the fathers of my brothers and sisters, and beat my wife or my girlfriend. You know, I'm not gonna be that. I told myself from a very young age, I'm gonna be a healthy partner, I'm gonna be a healthy father, and I'm gonna go to college and earn a career for myself and do something that I'm passionate about in life. And I've just really had this mentality, like, basically, I'm gonna be goody two shoes and I'm gonna be the perfect person, basically, is what I told myself. And, you know, I kind of laugh at it sometimes because it didn't happen that way right away, but at the same time, I don't laugh at it because it was the driving force of where I am now. I always had that kid in the back of my head reminded me of what I wanted to do with my life, even during times where I was down and I was making mistakes. So that's kind of like my early childhood, you know, and it was in that household that I met my father for the very first time, you know. I remember seeing pictures of myself with my dad sucking on his toes and things like that when I was about 1 or 2 years old, but I never knew him. I was too young to remember that. So my first time meeting him, I was about 8 or 9 years old, and he just picked me up. My mom was like, "All right, that's your dad," and I was like, "Whoa," you know, I was just kind of blindsided by it. And she sent me out to his pickup truck, and we went up to the res, and that was my introduction to him. I just jumped in his truck, and he was like, "Hey, boy," whatever, and I don't really remember much of the drive up there, but I do remember my time up there. And my dad had a drinking problem. You know, even when he first met me, he was drinking. He was, you know, sitting me out in the back of his pickup truck, watching these guys fight on the reservation, saying he'd beat their, you know, he'd kick their butts and all this and that. And he got mad at me one time while he was drinking and threw me across the room. I landed on the couch, and I remember being scared of him. And I took off and ran to the neighbor's house, and I hid in their shower. And I ended up staying with a friend of his for the remainder of my time there, and I stayed a whole summer with them. And ended up finally going back to my mom after the end of the summer. But that was my introduction to my father, which was pretty traumatic as a kid, you know. And these are just my experiences, you know. Not that all natives have these experiences. Everybody's got their unique experiences, but it's what shaped me as a person. And I remember going back with my mom, and, you know, she got us back from my grandma's house, and she got into, you know, multiple different unhealthy relationships with different guys. You know, there's this guy, Terry, we lived with him. He threw a vase at her head. I think he might have hit her in the head with a vase, and we moved into a battered women's shelter that was specifically for Native Americans, and it was an interesting experience there. You know, I met a girl there for the first time. I was like 11, 12 years old by this time, and it was like my first little girlfriend, you know, my first little crush and everything. So it was fun for that reason. And they also had a little game room, so I'd be in there with my little buddies who also lived in this shelter, and we'd be playing video games and stuff like that, and playing basketball out in the backyard. So this battered women's shelter, Women of Nations Eagles Nest Shelter in St. Paul, Minnesota, was really a bright spot in my life as a child. And another interesting thing I like to talk about there, I just remember being a kid, and there's 2 floors of there was 1 floor with residents, there's one floor with offices, and then the first floor was the common area, like the kitchen, the living room, and other offices. And all the residents stayed on the second floor. And I remember laying in my bunk bed, like 11, 12 years old or so, and maybe 10, I forget exactly the age, but I remember hearing like toy cars rolling around on the floor above ours at night, like 10 p.m. We're going to bed, and I hear toy cars playing around, kids playing upstairs from us, but I knew that there were no residents up there. And I remember talking to my mom, and she said that she went up, that's where all the office cubicles were, and she went up there for one of the staff members one day to get them something, and there was a lock on it, so she went back to get the combination for the lock. And when she went back up, the lock was gone, and the door was open, and it was pitch black in the office spaces. And that was my introduction to spirits. You know, I learned that spirits were real at that point in my life. And then I was thinking ghosts, you know, like, oh my God, there's ghosts up there. But I had come to find out that this building that this shelter is in used to be an orphanage or something in like the early 1900s, and that kids had passed away there. So that was an interesting thing. Yeah, so I had a good time there, and I understood, I came to understand what spirits were and things like that. And then my mom got us out of there, and we moved to this small town called Rebel Falls, and it was probably the best couple of years of my childhood. I met friends. It was the first time we stayed in a place for like 2 or 3 years without moving. Met a lot of friends. I was like the new kid in town. I was like this little handsome guy. Had a lot of girls crushing on me and stuff. I was the new kid at school, and all these girls were crushing on me. Got into some fights over it with guys and stuff like that, which is not a good thing. But the best part about it was we were playing these massive games of football. And I've always been passionate about football, and we were playing these massive 10-on-10 tackle games of football in these big fields that were outside of the townhouses where we lived. And I made a lot of friends, and I was able to kind of get out of my shell and be comfortable somewhere, you know. And my mom was taking care of us. It was her, me, and my brothers and my sister. It was the most normal my childhood had ever been. And it all kind of came crashing down after a couple years when my mom fell to her addiction again, and I had never been previously exposed to it. My brothers they had been in foster care prior, but I ended up getting put in foster care and bouncing throughout the system because of my mom's habit. You know, she would be gone for a week or two at a time and tell us it was because of work, and I believed her because I didn't know better, because I never experienced this, until one day I came home and she had locked herself in the bathroom for more than 24 hours. And she kept saying, I'll be right out for like a day. And I was worried. So my brothers finally got home the next day, and I told them Mom's been locked in this bathroom, and they kicked the door in because they knew they were older and they had been through this with her before. And I seen my mom like I never seen her before. You know, she was different. Her eyes, her pupils were funny looking, and her lips were crackling, and she was smoking crack. And that began a long road of like unhealthiness for me. I began to build resentment toward my mom because of it, because we got put in all these different foster homes where we were exposed to abuse from strangers. And I didn't know at the time that, you know, addiction was a thing. I didn't realize it was a disease that could grasp somebody's mind and turn them into something they didn't want to be. And obviously I'm grown now and I know better and I forgive my mom, but at the time it made me build a lot of resentment from my mother, and bounced all over the place, became real introverted. I was moving like constantly. It seemed like I remember counting 25 to 30 different schools that I've been to, kindergarten through 12th grade, largely because of foster homes and having to move because of that. And, you know, I always told myself I would never drink and smoke. That was one of the things I also said when I was that 9-year-old boy on the couch, or however old I was. And 15 years old comes around, 14, 15, I come around and start hanging out with my older brothers and stuff. And I take my first puff, my first drink, and spiral into addiction and alcoholism really fast, because it was like an escape, but it was also a way for me to fit in with the older crowd. And, you know, that that whole period of my life while I was using was bad, you know, and I remember basically becoming somewhat of a functioning alcoholic, I guess, you know, because my senior year came around, you know, 9th and 10th grade, I was like a straight B plus student. But then after I started doing what I was doing, my grades plummeted, my GPA plummeted. I missed out on a lot of credits, and my senior year came around, and that 9-year-old kid came back into my head and told me, you know, like, hey, it's senior year, you still want to graduate so you can go to college and make something of yourself. And I basically did summer school the year before senior year. I took these double credit courses for kids who were in my position to having to catch up on credits. I stayed after school like 3 days a week for the entire senior year, but I was still partying and everything. So I just was a functioning alcoholic, but I managed to graduate high school on time. And I remember being so proud. And then prior to graduating, I sat down in my advisor's office who believed in me because she seen my potential in my 9th and 10th grade years. And she really believed in me. And I didn't really believe in myself. You know, I said, I want to go apply to the University of Minnesota. And she helped me with the application. I applied and I got a rejection letter. Basically, I walked home to my auntie's house who I was living at the time. My junior and senior year, I lived with my auntie Paula. And I walked home and got this thin letter from the University of Minnesota saying I was rejected. So I was like, all right, well, I don't really expect to make it in anyway. So I went back to school. And I told my advisor, Patty Blado, that I was gonna apply to Minneapolis Community Technical College because I knew that I could get in there. They would just place me in the right courses for my level of education. But Patty Blado, as passionate as she was about helping the kids, she said, you know, screw that, we're gonna make an appeals based on extenuating circumstances, describing and laying out everything I'm telling y'all right now. I was like, all right, you're the boss. And I sat down in her office and she helped me format this letter, this appeals letter. And I reapplied based on extenuating circumstances and got home, you know, however long it was later, a couple weeks passed, however long it was. And found this fat letter from the University of Minnesota on the mail desk at my auntie's house. And I was like, all right, well, I know they didn't send me this thick piece of mail just to tell me no. So I opened it and I braced myself. And sure enough, that first document said, congratulations, Paul Winnell Jr., you've been accepted to the University of Minnesota. And I was like, wow, I made it. You know, I'm a Minnesota Gopher. And I was so proud of myself with good reason because nobody in my life had ever been to a 4-year institution, much less graduated from one. And I convinced myself because of that I had made it. Like, all right, I'm a college student now. I have nothing to worry about. You know, I was just not thinking this. I wasn't thinking this all the way through because, you know, where college is the expectation and the norm for a lot of kids out there, for me, it was something extremely abnormal and unusual. And it was such a great accomplishment. And I convinced myself that I had made it. So I didn't think to further change myself or grow anymore. I kept drinking and partying, and I got to college. And I met my son's mom right away. And she's from Standing Rock, and she grew up a lot like myself. Bad examples, unhealthy relationships, being exposed to not being exposed to healthy examples of what fatherhood or motherhood was, not being exposed to healthy examples of what it was to be a healthy man or woman. And our relationship got off to a bad start about a month or two in. It really became about partying all the time, and we should have probably broke up after a few months, but we stayed together out of codependency and found out she was pregnant. And in summer of 2007, found out she was pregnant, and we tried to make it work for that reason. And, you know, fast forward to February 2008. I'm still in college at this point. Fortunately, I almost got kicked out of my sophomore year, but I went through academic probation, complied with what they needed me to do, and I stayed in school, fortunately. But my son was born, and I remember my son being born and just seeing him, he had to be cut out. She had to have C-section. I remember seeing him being pulled out of her stomach, and And I was just like, wow, you know, and they asked me if I wanted to cut the umbilical cord. And I said, no, y'all do that. I was too scared. No, I didn't want to hurt my son. And I remember going into the nursery after they cleaned him off and put him in there, and he was bawling his eyes out. And I walked in there and I just whispered in his ear, and he like automatically recognized my voice from all the times I would talk to him through his mother's stomach, through her womb. And he recognized my voice, and that was amazing to me. But even that experience, the miracle that it was and how powerful it was not enough for me to just abruptly cold turkey quit drinking and everything I was doing. You know, it took a while longer, and there had been times when he was a few months old and me and his mom would be arguing, and I would notice my son tuning it out. So I knew then that me and her could not stay together. And we agreed to break up in about October or so of 2008. It was for the better. And I remember going to jail right around that same time because I got into another situation, and I had been in multiple situations due to my drinking. I got into another situation, and I remember being in that jail cell and remembering that 8 or 9-year-old kid who sat on my grandma's couch on the porch that day telling myself all the great things I was going to become. I remember sitting in that jail cell like I'm the father that my dad was, you know, like I was in an unhealthy relationship with my son's mom. I didn't have anything really going for myself other than college. Didn't have a job, you know, like the only thing I had going for myself was school. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, I'm basically my dad, you know, like here I am in a jail cell. I haven't been the best father. I haven't been the best partner. I haven't even been the best student. I've been a lot of things that I said I would never be. And I remember really feeling inspired, and I came to tears in that jail cell, and I left that courtroom. They told me that I was out on condition of probation for a year and doing UAs and making sure I was getting court cards signed for sobriety meetings. And it was a blessing in disguise because I probably couldn't have got sober by myself. It took that kind of kick in the butt for me to want it, you know, and I did it. I did it because I knew I had to. I knew it was time for change. It was time for change. It was time for me to step up and be a real father and to be a better man all around. And I did everything. I stayed sober, had a few relapses throughout the process, but I complied with everything as far as probation went. I got off of probation on good terms. And I've been sober since June 17, 2009 now. And shortly before that, you know, 2 days before I got sober for good, my son's mom took my baby boy and she moved up to Grand Forks, North Dakota with them 5 hours from Minneapolis. And that was part of what really lit the fire under me as well. I remember having a relapse, and June 17 came around. I woke up at my cousin's house. Everything was dimly lit. The sun was not shining through the shades. The place smelled bad. You know, there was empty beer cans everywhere. And I said I had enough, you know, and I never really knew if I believed in the creator or anything like that. And I'm not trying to preach that or teach that, but just speaking from my own experience, being in those meetings, they say you need to have a higher power. And I was like, all right, well, I got to try this then. And I recall a time when my mom sat us all down in a circle while we were kids, and she burned sage, and we all smudged and prayed. And I remember feeling something at that time. And so I fell back on that, and I burned some smudge. I burned some sage, and I smudged, and I just prayed. And then I was just basically like, you know, if anything's out there, you know, listening to me, please help me stay sober for this one single day. And I got up and I cleaned the house, and I got outside and I went to some meetings, and I just kept praying and praying. And, you know, and one day turned into a week, and then week turned into weeks and months and years now. And that was really a huge step for me in becoming who I am today, which is still an imperfect individual who makes mistakes, but is hugely improved from who I was back then. And, you know, where I'm at today, you know, I picked up music to fill the void of alcohol and partying, you know. And I remember going to my first open mic right around this time when I got sober, and I was so scared, so nervous, especially as an introverted person who didn't talk a lot due to all the moving I had been through and all the schools I had attended and being the new kid all the time. But I forced myself to go to this open mic. There's like 200 people in an auditorium at the University of Minnesota. And I signed my name up and I sat down and I wanted to leave so bad. And I didn't. I forced myself. I knew I didn't want to be just like an internet rapper. I wanted to get out there and do it for real. And they called my name. I went up there and I stumbled on some words. I forgot some lines. I even ran out of breath. But at the end, I was like, it don't get no worse than this. Like, I already like horribly messed up. So I'm just gonna, you know, catch off where I left. And I finished the song strong. I stopped looking at the ground, started looking into the crowd. I stopped standing still, started moving around a little bit. And that was my first performance. And that taught me that you just got to face your fears and you will overcome them and excel at whatever it is that you're passionate about. And that's what I did, you know. And doing open mics turned into being invited to do shows, and doing shows around the state of Minnesota turned into being invited to do shows in the Midwest and all the way out to the West Coast and East Coast and all around the country now. And I've been overseas. I've been to Canada, and today, you know, I'm 11 years sober. I take care of my child full time almost. You know, there's been somewhat of a role reversal, I guess, you know, whereas when my son was young, it was largely his mom doing everything. Now it's been me, and she's kind of having her same struggles that I was having back then. You know, she kind of fell into what I was in back then, I guess. She's struggling with her stuff now, and I'm just glad that I'm sober now and that I can hold my son down while she tries to get healthy, you know. And you know, that's where I'm at today. I'm a full-time dad, got a girlfriend, we got a place together. We're saving up to become homeowners, paid off all our debts, and got a cool dog, and I'm traveling, making a living, doing what I love to do. And I'm more like the person that I always said that I was gonna be that day when I was about 8 or 9 years old. You know, I'm doing something that I love to do and that I'm passionate about, and I make a living doing it. I'm in a healthy relationship with my significant other. I graduated college. Got a lot of things to be grateful for. And yeah, that's where I'm at today. And, you know, I guess more recently, obviously, I live in Minneapolis, and I'm part of the Native American community here. And there was patrols happening during the riots and everything. And I remember feeling a calling to be out there with my people, helping to protect the community that raised me and that protected me when I was a child, you know, and that has done so much for me and is still doing much for me today. So me and my girlfriend went out there with the American Indian Movement Patrol, and we helped to patrol all the Native businesses and residences and communities to keep our people and our establishments safe from damage. And there was a lot going on out here, you know. It's like I remember being at different places and seeing people, you know, it was lawless, really. It was a lot of lawlessness. And the cops themselves were not willing to help, even when they could have. The prejudice and racism exhibited in the police force was really rearing its head, because there were times when they could have been of help and they weren't, and they didn't want to be. They just wanted to, you know, try to teach people a lesson, you know, I think. And I mean, I remember seeing people setting buildings to fire, seeing people running red lights, swerving into oncoming traffic on Lake Street, which is a main street in South Minneapolis. And it really reminded me of like them Purge movies, except for all the killing, you know. And there was some killing that happened, but not like that. But that's what the environment was here like. And we were just out trying to make sure that nobody damaged any Native properties or set back our community to a point where we would have to rebuild everything that we have established within our community. And I was proud to be able to do that. You know, there was one incident in which we were driving to the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe Twin Cities office, and right across the street from there is a liquor store, and we found as we were driving by, we seen these white guys jumping in and out of the store, looting it. So we hopped out the truck and we apprehended them. Didn't hurt them. We apprehended them. We actually only caught one at first because he split up from his friends. We caught him, and his friends didn't want to leave him because, you know, lo and behold, they came all the way from Wisconsin to quote unquote witness history and to partake in looting and all of this and that. And they were definitely there for the wrong reasons, you know, whereas a lot of people were there for the right reason, protesting and trying to have our voices heard. There's, you know, these white kids from Wisconsin who are like 17, 18 years old, drove all the way here so they could loot and damage our neighborhoods. And that didn't sit well with us as people of color who got to live here, while these kids get to go back home to Wisconsin to their cozy homes and their privilege and not get in trouble for it, you know. And no cops would have came and helped us. We didn't call the cops, you know. We apprehended them and we called their parents, and their parents came and chewed them out. And I think that is a good step towards restorative justice. Hopefully them kids learn something. Can't guarantee it, you know. They didn't seem to be taking it too seriously. There are times we caught them giggling and stuff like that, but we can't control that. And I know there were some of us there that probably wanted to hurt them, but I'm glad that we didn't do that. We handled it how cops should handle it, you know. It was about our safety, it was about their safety, it was about justice, and that's how it needs to be. And this whole time, being out there patrolling, seeing the unity and the organization and all the donations and people taking care of the elders, it taught me that, you know, police say they do, you know, to protect and serve, which is beings who wear a police uniform are inherently bad, but the system itself is bad. And that's why when whistleblower cops come out, they get fired or they get worse, you know, they get their lives threatened, you know, because this blue code of silence and secrecy or whatever is just, it's corrupt. And that's why I'm fully on board with defunding police and everything like that. And yeah, I mean, that kind of sums up my experience. Obviously, it's not that simple, you know. There are situations that felt dangerous out there, and I'm not getting into every single last detail, but yeah, we're out there patrolling and keeping our businesses and our community safe, and that's all we did. And we were successful. And with that being said, I'm gonna do a few performance pieces. So first, Red Poet Society. It's myself and Twin City Tone. He's a native and Black DJ and radio host here in Minneapolis. Yeah, I don't know if he's a DJ, but I know he's a radio host. But anyway, we're a group, Red Poet Society. I don't know if y'all can hear that. My dog's kind of going crazy. I hope that's not bothering the sound. But we're a duo, native hip hop duo, and we got this song called "Make America Great." We obviously left out the again part because America has never been great to us brown and Black folks. Maybe a select few, but not myself, you know, not my people, you know. So we made this project and this song called "Make America Great" for the first time, basically, because we want to see that come to happen. And that's what all this justice work is about. And I'm just going to do a verse from that song. And it goes like this. Can't make America great again because it never was. Founded on slavery and genocide, they some clever thugs. Grounded on burial minds of my indigenous blood. Well, they erased our history and made his story up. They pledge allegiance to a symbol of a colored lives. Condemn you if you kneel before a song that's oversized. Tell you a sandwich for $1, still it's overpriced. Because the diabetes and disease stays on the rise. You got a better chance of seeing presidential tweets than you do with seeing him send Puerto Rico real relief. So many Americans are really Confederates in disguise. Couldn't pick them bottles out of a crowd because they're wearing stripes. Since they got a problem with us, they should go back home. Back to the land where sundial shining cows and swine roam. If they can't honor constitutions that their people wrote, I can't see improvement unless it means them leaving on a boat. And you know, the end of that verse just kind of speaks to this idea that there have been actual indigenous people here who have been told to go back to the country they came from by European Americans, you know, which is just hilarious to me. So it's just kind of speaking on the irony of that ending of that verse. And I wrote a song also, and I don't got it memorized, so I'm gonna read it off my phone. And I don't got the beat, obviously. I'm doing all of this a cappella for the sake of sound and being able to hear everything. But and the kind of amid everything that was going on one night while I was home for the night, taking one night off from patrolling to kind of collect myself and rest, I wrote this song inspired by Indigenous Black solidarity, you know, Black and Indigenous solidarity and different things I've witnessed throughout my life, such as prejudice on either side towards the other, you know, in this divide and conquer scheme and mentality that has pervaded our communities. And I wrote this song inspired by that. Take a drink of water and I'll read it to y'all. It goes like this. Rain tap in the window, hair flow when the wind blow. This here for my kinfolk, straight soul on the intro. Fire flame like endo, been out here they endo. Real needs no pretendo, this ain't no innuendo. Skin glow cause I'm healthy, just hope natives felt me. We got to do better for ourselves and for our families. Older natives, stop acting like you can't understand these verses from vernaculars expressed in hip-hop stanzas. Telling native youth they're acting black is just a cancer. It ain't our fault that hip-hop culture was the only answer. Plus that makes a black and native youth think being black's a bad thing. I can't stand for that. My native brothers raising black queens. Black and native solidarity is on my mind. Every time a black man dies, we shouldn't shout our native cries. You know we're dying too, so you should know we'll have our time. Struggle Olympics in America, everybody get in line. They shoot and hide it, they loot and riot, they do. Inside it with bricks, provided in ops, disguised in jumpsuits. They're violent, our youth are guilty, they spew to try them, but you are blind to the truth. Inside it, they shoot and hide it, they loot and riot, they do. Inside it with bricks, provided in ops, disguised in jumpsuits. They're violent. Riots and looting ain't the mind of the movement, but fam, your eyes are deluded if you're trying to remove it. It takes many strategies from peace to violence and using collective spending power to feed ours while starving or schmoozing. Forget their lip service, yeah, it's time to rebuke it. Finally abolish police to keep our spines out of nooses. Family, polish your peace to keep supremacists oozing. If they ever try to lynch you, then just promise you use it. And if you're craving pizza, then just buy it from people who sport a complexion like yours with the mindset that's equal. Have to keep our colored dollars in our colored communities. Keep spending it with them and they'll keep getting immunity. Never heard of a Jews getting killed by cops epidemic. The Jewish save their money. We'd rather spend it than invest it. They've learned from their history of oppression. I respect it. Doesn't hurt the white complected. Nonetheless, that's still a lesson. When you have a bone to dangle over the nose of America, America's more prone to treat your own like they're Erica. Owners wield the weapon, that's the threat of divestment. They will respect our lives if only for its incentives. If you're not at the table, then you are on the menu. We gotta build our stable and take over the venue. Cause how we gonna win without a horse in the race? People, it's time we admit we have some fault in our place. Discontinue spending money with businesses and corps whose interest is funded systems, contracted lynches and corpses. I know dollar bills alone won't deliver us from their evil. Yet if we starved them every time they killed us, maybe they'd cease to. They shoot and hide it, they loot and riot, they do. Incite it with bricks, provided in ops, disguised in jumpsuits. Violent, our youth are guilty, they spew to try them, but you are blind to the truth. Inside it, they shoot and hide it, they loot and riot, they do. Incite it with bricks, provided in ops, disguised in jumpsuits. They're violent. And that chorus really speaks on the fact that there are videos out there of cops damaging their own vehicles, pulling up in SUVs and unloading pallets full of bricks in areas of protest because these cops are trying to incite riots, and they are inciting riots. And they're damaging property themselves to try to pin it on protesters to kill the name of the movement and try to act as if the protesters are the same as the people who are smashing these windows and stuff like that, you know. And that's what that chorus is about, and that whole song just was inspired about Black and Indigenous solidarity and how we need to support one another in times of our struggles, because we have so much in common historically as far as genocide goes and slavery, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one song right there that I wanted to share as well. And with that, I think I would open it up to the question and answer. And I know I've been kind of talking and going for like the past half hour, 40 minutes or so, and it's kind of strange not like seeing anybody's faces or anything like that. So I guess I'll open it up to question and answer, and I don't know if it's handled. Yeah.
I'll just open up and say thank you, Paul. That was a really generous presentation, and I feel you. I just did a presentation myself, a performance on webinar, and it was so weird. The one I did was on a webcast, so I couldn't even ask people to unmute themselves and or their videos. So yeah, so I just want to say I really appreciate your story and your honesty and your art. And I don't really have a question. I just wanted to give you something back for everything you gave to us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is Diane Dix. I want to tell everybody that we'll have a chance to meet Paul next summer, because we were not sure whether he could make it to the festival. So he'll be here next summer. I think the date is August 7th and August 8th. And I thank you too, Paul. I learned a lot and I felt a lot too.
Thank you. So I guess if anybody has questions, maybe just type them into the chat, and if not, I'll give it a minute or two, see if there's anything.
Yeah, people can also unmute. You can unmute yourself, the audio and the camera if you'd like.
Hi, Paul. This is Kate, and I just wanted to thank you for sharing so much and bringing your words and your music here too. Well, through it, and I don't know if I read something recently. It was about the doctrine of discovery, doctrine of domination, and it was a really good little article about how that doctrine in 1492, I think it was, basically started the slave trade in Africa and the taking of land over here, linking the African and Native American need for solidarity like 600 years ago.
Yeah. So the doctrine of discovery, yeah, I've heard of it. Just like the justification of basically, committing genocide and using religion as a reason to enslave and to occupy other people's lands and basically be on that mission of conquest over other human beings. Like, yeah, I'm familiar. I learned about that in college, actually. I remember learning a little bit about that in one of my native politics courses, the doctrine of discovery. Yeah. All right, well, if there's not any more questions, I wanted to share this link. I'm gonna type it in here real quick. So I'm gonna see if it works here. So it's a Google Doc, and it's from Reclaim the Block, which is an organization here that is about abolishing the police, defunding the police, and so on. And it's a link that has a lot of different organizations that people can donate to if you have the means. So I'm going to share that link here. And then if you click on it, it has a pretty good list of different organizations that are doing the work around not only defunding the police, but also, you know, empowering people of different communities. So I just wanted to have a call to action right there, is just post that link. And if anybody has the means to donate to any of those organizations, please do. You know, some of them are like just reading off, you know, the Birth Revolution, Black Immigrant Collective, Chicago Lake Dental, a lot of them, Division of Indian Work, which I actually used to work for the Division of Indian Work, and there's a lot of good work being done there. But yeah, that's just a pretty good list that I was able to find that Reclaim the Block put together. So if anybody has the means to donate, please do.
Thank you,
And
Paul.
yeah.
I do have a question. David, I'm going to mute you because I think I'm getting some background noise or feedback. Yeah, my question is, you know, I needed a minute to think about your story and everything you were saying. And I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about the Native American community in Minneapolis. Oh, I see my internet's a little unstable, so I'm going to turn my camera off. Yeah, I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about the Native American community in Minneapolis, because I'm assuming that in a city, in an urban setting, you have people from lots of different nations and tribes. And I'm just wondering how you all come together to work in solidarity, and you know how you navigate the differences in language and culture and all that.
So yeah, Minneapolis has one of the largest urban Indian populations in the country, and it's primarily Dakota, which, you know, Minnesota is Dakota land, is Dakota territory traditionally and historically, and then it's predominantly Dakota, Lakota, and Ojibwe. There is some other tribes that are here that are represented, you know, Ho-Chunk, different tribes, but primarily Ojibwe and Dakota. So there's not a ton of cultural difference between the tribes here. And a lot of people have both tribes represented within their families and friend circles and things like that. So there's not typically any conflict for tribal reasons or anything like that. Like I know my own son is Dakota and Ojibwe. But I think the community comes together just because we have a lot of positive-minded community members who are about forward progress for our communities. You know, we support our business owners. We make sure to spend our money at Native-owned establishments, and you know, everything's not peaches and cream. We have a lot of problems too. There's a lot of, you know, overdose going around, you know, within the Native community, but in general. So it's not unique to us either. But you know, addiction and all of that has its grasp on our communities. But fortunately, we have a lot of leaders within our communities and our organizations that are all about healing these different things, you know. Yeah, it's pretty awesome to see, you know, there's organizations all over the Twin Cities that are ran by Natives. And I'm fortunate to grow up in a urban population where there's a lot of Native people. I think just the number of us here helps to ease that process of making sure that we're providing programming and resources for our people and our communities.
Thank you, Paul. That's great.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, totally. There's a comment in the chat window. Seal says, thank you so much for sharing your story so deeply and honestly. It was very moving and inspiring. Thank you for your wisdom, clarity, and integrity. Congratulations on your years of sobriety. Such a huge accomplishment. And thank you for sharing the story of how you all handled patrolling and responding to the kids you found looting, how it should be. Thank you for your creative music, writing, and lyrics. So powerful and deep. Look forward to hearing you in person next year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
All right, well, I appreciate y'all hearing me out and giving me this platform to share my experiences and to share my talents with y'all.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to ask folks who feel comfortable to just open up their video so that Paul can get a glimpse of us and give him a thanks in, with your face. You can do this. This is the, the Zoom way of giving applause without having to unmute yourself. So thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank y'all.
Thank you.
All right, have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, y'all have a good night. Take care.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next year.
See ya.